Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first Apex Wellbeing webinar of 2025. I don't know about you, but it's been a long January. So this topic is going to be perfect that we're covering today. Today we're going to be talking about understanding burnout. So kind of two different perspectives, one from the employee as yourself, what you should be on the lookout for, and then as the manager, how you can help your employees, if you're seeing those symptoms. I'm Katherine Kirchhoff, Director of Kinetiq Health here at Apex.
And I'm Andrea Hickel, licensed clinical social worker and Kinetiq Health Specialist here at Apex.
So to start, we'll go over a few webinar housekeeping tips. All attendees will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. For questions or comments, you can use the chat box located at the right-hand side of your webinar screen. We do have Josh in here, so if you want to send any questions, we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. For audio access, attendees can use computer audio or call in using the phone option. And presentation slides and resources can be downloaded by clicking the icon on the right-hand side of your webinar screen.
Awesome. And so, as Katherine mentioned, we are going to be talking about kind of two sides of burnout or two perspectives. But here's the agenda for today. We are going to go over the basics of what is burnout, how to identify it personally, some signs and symptoms to look out for, as well as some risk factors that can put you at greater risk for experiencing burnout. And then I'm going to pass it over to Katherine, and she's going to talk from the manager's perspective about employer solutions to addressing burnout, as well as how to address mental health and workplace culture. And we'll also have time for questions. Okay, so what is burnout? Burnout is something that is definitely a hot button topic. It really has been for the past 5 years since COVID. Not to say that it didn't exist long before COVID, right? But with more hybrid work schedules and just more stressors in general, we've been seeing a lot more people talking about and experiencing burnout. But an overall definition of burnout is a feeling of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that happens because of overwork. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today has to do with the workplace and burnout as it relates to the workplace. But I want you to know that burnout can also exist in other areas of your life, socially, family-wise. And so even though we are talking a lot about work, just know that these can exist in other areas as well.
And the things we're going to talk about, they look the same, it just doesn't apply necessarily to work.
Yes,
okay.
100%. So I like to highlight the 12 stages of burnout because I think it can give people a good picture of what burnout can look like in real time. It's not something where you wake up one day and, oh, I'm burnout, right? It happens gradually over time. It might feel like it's all of a sudden because maybe you aren't able to recognize some of these signs and symptoms. But I like to talk about how you want to stay within the first 6 stages of burnout. You might recognize some of these things that I'm going to talk about because they're very universal and actually pretty normal. But it's important that you recognize it and are able to refresh yourself and get back to a good baseline so that you don't get or fall underneath the last 6 stages of burnout. So when we look at these stages, the first stage is you feel a strong need to prove yourself. So this is common when you're first coming into the workforce, when you're starting a new job, and it's not inherently bad. We want to go into things excited and eager to make a difference and do well. And I know, talking personally as a social worker, obviously I went into this field because I wanted to help people. And I know that when I first entered the workforce, I was really eager to make big changes. And I soon learned that there's a lot of barriers to that and a lot of things that come into play. And so I definitely felt stage 1 firsthand. And stage 2 is when you start working harder to achieve this goal. So again, not inherently bad. You're excited, you're eager, you want to make a change, and you realize, like I did, that there's some barriers in place. So now you say, okay, that's fine. I'm going to work harder. Maybe that means I'm going to go into work earlier. I'm going to stay later. I'm going to stop taking my lunch breaks. I'm going to take work home with me. You know, you're trying to make up for some of these roadblocks that have been put in your place. But that brings us to stage 3, and that's when you start to neglect your own needs. Again, because you're trying to achieve this goal, maybe you're not getting enough sleep because you're bringing work home. Again, you're not getting adequate nutrition during the day because you're not really taking time to drink water or take your lunch break. You really start to neglect some of that. And that's a big sign to look out for that might tell you, okay, I need to refresh. I need to, take care of myself a little bit.
Is there something to consider too in like those one-off projects or one-off busy seasons that you could be in these stages, but there's an end in sight?
Yes.
It's kind of when there's no end in sight looming where you really need to evaluate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, because we all have busy seasons, right? I know here at Apex, all different departments go through our busy seasons. And so, yeah, we might have longer hours or have to take that work home. But if it's for a short period of time and you can say, okay, at the end of this, I'm able to really reset, take care of myself, then great. But if it's a constant thing or your workload is constantly too much for you, that's definitely when you need to consider it. So then stage 4 is when you start to become conflicted and blame others for the situation. Again, I've been guilty here. And you might experience more frustration, more irritability, and you're taking that out on others. You're coming home and you're taking it out on your family or your friends or even your coworkers. You're misplacing that frustration. That's a huge sign and symptom to look out for. Stage 5, you start to change your values to focus on work more. So again, you're maybe not taking the time for your family or extracurriculars and hobbies that you used to because you are consumed by work. And so you start to see those relationships and those things suffering. Stage 6 is you deny that the problem is due to work. Again, it can be easy to do if somebody does call you out on it, or maybe your manager does approach you and you say, no, I'm fine, I've got it. When in reality, if you were just to say, no, I do think I'm a little overwhelmed with this, you might be able to get the help you need to feel a little bit more balanced. But like I said, I think it's good to stay within these first 6 stages, recognize some of those symptoms earlier on, and then you have a greater likelihood that you can really kind of bounce back. The last 6 stages, that's when we start to see it more impact us both mentally and physically. So stage 7, you become withdrawn from your social life and your family as well. So we already talked about in the earlier stages that you might shift your priorities a little bit, take time away from family and friends. But with this, you're really isolating. You're becoming more emotionally withdrawn. Stage 8, your behavior changes, which again upsets loved ones, seeing a lot of impact on your relationships here. Stage 9, depersonalization happens. You don't really feel like yourself. It's almost like you're just going through the motions. And I can also say I have been in this stage with some other work that I've done where you become so immune, you're just kind of going through the motions and you're not really able to see things clearly. Stage 10, that's when you start to feel empty, numb, more of that depression, and you might start self-medicating with substances or other negative coping strategies. Stage 11, again, feeling very depressed, lost, very exhausted. And then finally, stage 12 is when you are at a mental and physical collapse or full burnout. And that's when we see a lot of our employees who are needing to take disability or FMLA because they have gotten to this point. So here are some of the signs and symptoms, and I've talked a little bit about those when going over the stages, but some of the main signs and symptoms to look out for: overall exhaustion, and again, that could be due to a lot of factors, not sleeping, emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted. Isolation, as I mentioned, is huge. So if you start to seem like you're isolating from your supports, family, friends, even your coworkers. If you're kind of coming within yourself, not talking or engaging, that's a huge sign. Escape fantasies. So kind of the, if I could just be on a beach in Tahiti, right, that would make everything better. Which we all feel that way at some point or another, right? Yeah. But if you're constantly feeling that way, you want to escape your life, your current present. Irritability, as I mentioned, is a huge one. Snapping at little things, and projecting anger at other people. Frequent illness. So when we have high levels of stress, our immune system does worsen, and so we are more susceptible to getting sick. As we mentioned, depersonalization, difficulty concentrating. If you're often foggy, you can't really focus on one thing for too long. And then again, anger, frustration, taking that out on others, feelings of anxiety, and then also some of the muscle pain or muscle tension. That's another physical symptom that you could look out for as a sign. And then I also wanted to hit on some risk factors that could put you at greater disposition for experiencing burnout. So just like anything else, any physical condition, mental condition, we do have risk factors that make us more susceptible to experiencing that. And burnout is no different. So if at baseline you have chronic sleep problems, you're already struggling with your sleep, then you're going to be more tired. You're not going to be where you need to be. And so that could definitely put you at greater risk. If you already are struggling with work-life balance, you already don't have a good grip on how to prioritize self-care and time at home, that could put you at greater risk. If you already are very dissatisfied with your life, so if you already are kind of in a place of feeling stagnant or not happy with your life, that could put you at greater risk. If you already struggle with poor stress management, so again, not having those positive coping strategies for stress, that can put you at greater risk. Low emotional control, so again, struggling with controlling your emotions in general. If you don't have if you do not have good support system, that is another risk factor. If you have pre-existing mental health concerns, that's another thing that could make you more susceptible. And then also, if your workload at baseline is just outrageous, then that can also put you at greater risk for experiencing burnout.
And this is the opportunity to like really observe these and find out, what resources you have available at your place of work. Do you have an EAP that can kind of help get these under control so that you can stay in those first 6 stages of burnout? Or do you have a manager that you have a relationship with that you have these risk factors, a project's coming up, that you might feel overwhelmed. Maybe there's something you can do about that.
100%. Managers are key. And so Catherine's definitely going to talk about that.
Yes. So employers feeling the impact. I think these percentages really speak for themselves. Percentages of Indiana employers who reported being greatly or somewhat impacted by member mental health in the following ways. So reduced employee morale, 69%, increased absenteeism, 55%, increased medical claims cost, 53%, increased presenteeism, 40%, and increased disability claims is 24%. So these are perfect examples on why you should care about burnout and the mental health of your employee population. Ultimately, these numbers can have a big impact on your organization. As the Kinetiq Health team at Apex, we are in the claims every single day, week, month, sending reports and really observing, especially when it comes to the medical claims costs. And something we see across the board as top chronic conditions are anxiety and depression. And anything we can do to decrease those at our places of work, I think, or offer services are really something we should consider.
100%.
So knowing your population, I think if you're a manager of people, this may be the most important slide of our presentation, specifically this data statistic. This was conducted by Workforce Institute at UKG. So new data suggests that for almost 70% of people, their manager has more impact on their mental health than their therapist or doctor, and it's equal to the impact of their partner. This statistic just speaks volumes to me, especially as a manager of
Mm-hmm.
people, to look at my team, my team and think I have the same ability to affect their mental health as a loved one, a spouse, a partner,
Mm-hmm.
or a therapist. That speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding your population as a whole and the people on your team so that you can help them succeed in their work, ultimately, which only impacts your workplace in a positive way. So, something to really consider is we are working with 4 different generations now in our workforce. And by knowing your population, really understanding where they are in this age range can kind of help you when it comes to better knowing them. So, young adults, for example, just starting off in their career, they might need a little bit more hand holding, especially those first out of college, mentorship, really making sure they have a good understanding of where they want to go in their career and how you can help support that. And then you also have people who are in childbearing
Yep.
ages. So having kids, we
We know
on the
that.
Kinetiq Health team have quite a few maternity leaves throughout the year. So really understanding that, and then understanding that kids get sick. So do you offer a flexible work environment so
Mm-hmm.
that your people know their kids come first, they can stay home, take care of their sick kiddos, and work can wait. Really making sure the priorities are very clear so that they don't feel that unneeded pressure. And then middle adulthood. So this age range, a lot more comfortable in their career, probably very confident. They probably don't need the hand holding and probably would
Don't want it.
appreciate
Yeah.
that, or what we would call micromanaging. Letting them do what they do best and just know that the door is open if they need you. And then something too to really consider is caregiver support.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about kids and having to care for them, but ages 40 to 65, elderly parents, aunts, uncles, or loved ones who are getting older and might need more care, really considering how you can support them in those journeys. I watched my mom try to take care of my grandparents while working full time, and that alone can cause burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you offer any support when it comes to caregiver support? Can you offer time off, to accommodate, them trying to get something established for their loved ones?
And your EAP too. A
Yep.
lot of EAPs have great supports for caregivers.
Absolutely. So, really educating your benefits to your population.
Yeah.
And then lastly, your older population, your maturity, people who are hopefully getting ready to retire and enjoy their next stage in life. What can you do to support those people so that they can reach that goal
Yeah.
of retirement and enjoying that next stage in their life? So, how can you identify early signs? When you know your team, it is easier to identify these early warning signs of burnout. So, increased absences, disengagement, exhaustion, increased mistakes or accidents, withdrawn, isolated. Like Andrea said, maybe you have a monthly lunch with your team and they're not coming anymore, something
Mm-hmm.
along those lines, or higher sensitivity. You provide feedback typically, and usually it's no big deal with that person, but suddenly you feel that they're really affected by that. Those are things to look out for.
Yeah. And Catherine is spot on that knowing your population is key to identifying these, because if you don't know their normal
Right.
patterns, you're not going to know.
Right. And I think it may be our first reaction to become frustrated with a team
Mm-hmm.
member if they're making mistakes or calling in more or showing up late. But instead of kind of going after that frustrated, you're in trouble route, maybe ask, what's going on with your life? Is there anything I can help with? Hey, I've noticed A, B, and C, and I just want to make sure you're okay before you go down the route of, why is this happening, and going the punishment route. So, where can we intervene as managers or employers? From the start, like we've said, know your employees so that when you are aware, so you're more aware of their behavior changes. If you aren't doing monthly check ins, things along those lines, how are you able to tell if someone is truly exhausted or they just don't seem like themselves? And as an employee to peer, I think it's super important to know your teammates.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to divulge all their personal
Yeah.
lives to their coworkers, and that's okay. But I think you can still have a relationship with coworkers enough to know that when something's off, you can ask, hey, you seem a little off. Is everything okay with you? Because just asking that question can go a super long way.
100%.
So having an open door policy and monthly check-ins. Catching the burnout before it truly turns into mistakes or absenteeism. If your employees trust that they can tell you as a manager that they feel overworked or they're really stuck on a project and they need help, you can step in before a mistake is made. And if they don't feel comfortable coming to you and they're scared, or they don't want you to look at them in a different light, that's something maybe you should consider reestablishing in your relationship. So like I said, if you're noticing an employee who is always on time is suddenly rolling in 10, 15, 20 minutes late, or all of a sudden they're late for meetings, have the conversation first of, is there something going on that I can help with? And, these are all very general. If it's current, repeat actions, that's a different conversation. But generally, I think asking first how you can help always goes a long way.
100%.
So, employer solutions for mental health in the workplace, support psychological health and safety, creating a work environment where people feel safe to get help. If they don't feel like they can go to their manager, or you as a manager or as an employee, you don't feel like that, that's feedback to give, whether it's to leadership or human resources. Really making sure you feel safe in your workplace and being able to voice that you feel overwhelmed or you have something going on personally and you might need to take some time off. Um, take that opportunity to really evaluate that. Apex has a safe people
Yep.
program. So there's certain people within the organization who know all of our mental health resources, and people at Apex can go to those people knowing they know all the resources, and it stays confidentially between those two people. So creating little teams or things within your organization that could possibly help.
And I think another thing that our managers do, and I think it goes a long way, is also just being transparent with your employees when you're struggling too. That way they feel safe to come to you.
Absolutely. And then employee involvement, conducting surveys to determine how challenges around health exist. One of the biggest recommendations I make to clients is, if you're going to survey your population, that's wonderful, but don't survey if you're not going to take into consideration what they have to say. Be ready to make some changes if it's necessary. If you're not in the place to make changes, maybe hold off until you get to that point. But your employees, it's important that they can trust that what you're putting in the survey is actually going to be heard. We understand that you can't change every little comment or thing that is put out there, but even small changes go a really long way. And then really establishing work-life balance, allowing flexible work schedules, telecommuting options, and family leave policies. This is super important. Do you have, as hybrid companies, I feel more and more people are going back to work, in the office hybrid. Do you have it out there that, if you're sick, there's no reason to come in, you can work from home? Do people feel that flexibility knowing, and do you have that trust in your employees that, the work is getting done? So I think that's all we have for today. Do we have any questions we can answer? Let's see. Okay. Okay. Well, if nothing yet, just some tips to consider continuing to market and educate your employees, and to what resources you do have at your workplace, whether it's your EAP, um, on-site or employer clinics, things along those lines, utilizing your broker to make sure you have all the resources that, you want when it comes to mental health. And then as an employee, going to your leadership or, people in charge to say, hey, I'm really looking for A, B, and C. I think this could really benefit our company. But burnout, it can happen. It does happen. Yeah. So hopefully we provided you with some tools on how to recognize, and how to deal with it if it's something you're going through.
Yeah, 100%.
So thank you so much for joining us. Next month, we will be talking about worksite insurance options. with our client services team. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.